Somewhere out in the freezing dark, a siren wailed and faded, but inside Delgado's all-night diner, nobody was breathing. 28 armed men had just boxed in Detroit's most feared crime boss inside a greasy corner diner. Guns leveled, exits sealed, every angle of retreat already accounted for. On paper, it should have ended in seconds. Clean, quiet, over before anyone outside those four walls ever noticed a thing had happened. What none of those 28 men counted on, what no amount of planning could have prepared them for, was a broke, exhausted waitress with a coffee pot in her hand, about to rewrite everything that happened next, and along with it, the entire balance of power in a city that thought it already knew who was in charge. A cup rattled against its saucer as Nadia Isabel Cruz ran a rag over the scratched countertop of Delgado's. The clock behind her read 2:14 a.m. on a miserable Tuesday. Outside, ice crept along the corners of the big front windows, half hiding the stuttering neon sign that buzzed like a trapped wasp. Inside, the place smelled the way it always did this late. Burnt fryer oil, bleach, and stale decaf baked into the walls. Nadia was 25, running on fumes, and $75,000 deep in nursing school loans that seemed to grow no matter how many extra shifts she picked up. She'd taken the 10 to 6 graveyard shift because it was the only slot that let her make her daytime clinicals without missing a single rotation, even if it meant functioning on scraps of sleep stolen between exams. Her whole existence had shrunk down to textbooks, cold coffee, and feet that never stopped aching by the third hour of any shift. She wasn't really living anymore, just surviving one exhausted week at a time, moving through the same worn routine like a woman watching her own life happen from somewhere just outside of it. The bell over the door jingled, and a gust of brutal cold rushed in behind it, scattering a napkin dispenser's worth of paper across the counter. Nadia glanced up on reflex, already reaching for a menu, then froze. Salvatore Dante Moreno walked in under the buzzing fluorescence, and even someone with zero connection to the city's underworld would have felt it. The man carried weight in a room just by existing. He ran the Moreno organization, an empire stitched together out of freight companies, real estate holdings, and things nobody in this city said out loud unless they wanted trouble finding their front door. Tonight, though, the impeccably dressed 36-year-old didn't look like a king. He looked like a man walking toward his own headstone, each step slower and heavier than the last. His dark, tailored jacket was ripped at the shoulder, a bruise already spreading dark and ugly along his jaw, and a fine layer of road dust clung to knees that had clearly hit pavement recently. His tie was gone, his collar hung open, and his gray eyes, usually so sharp they unsettled people from across a room, looked hollowed out with a bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of money or power could buy its way out of. Nadia knew him only as Sal. He came in maybe once a month, always took booth 6, always ordered his coffee black, and always tucked a folded $100 bill under the saucer before he left. She liked him, in the small, careful way you like a regular who never gives you trouble, who never makes a mess of your night just because he can. He never leered, never pushed, never raised his voice, and always treated her like a person instead of furniture, which, in this neighborhood, at this hour, counted for more than most people would ever understand. He crossed to his usual booth now, moving with none of his usual measured calm, and dropped into the cracked vinyl seat without even bothering to take off his coat, just staring past the frosted glass at the empty, snow-dusted lot outside, as though the answer to something was waiting for him out there in the dark. Nadia grabbed a mug and the carafe of fresh dark roast and walked it over, telling herself it was just another Tuesday, even as some quiet part of her already knew better. "Rough night, Sal?" she asked, keeping her voice level. He pulled his eyes from the window. For half a second, the wall he usually kept up slipped, and what looked back at her was a man who'd just watched everything he owned catch fire. "You could say that," he answered, his voice low and rough, the kind of night that doesn't end with a sunrise. Nadia filled his cup, steam curling off the surface in the cold air. "Well, you're safe in here," she offered. "Worst thing waiting for you tonight is my manager's cherry pie. It's been sitting in that case since Sunday." A small, tired smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a thick, unlabeled envelope, sliding it across the table until it bumped her mug. "What's this?" she asked, frowning. "Your tuition," he said quietly, "and severance. I need you to walk into the kitchen, grab your coat, and go out the back alley door. Right now. Don't stop for your books. Don't look back. Just go, Nadia." She stared at the envelope, thick enough to be tens of thousands of dollars, and felt her stomach drop. The exhaustion evaporated, replaced instantly by a spike of cold fear. "Sal, I can't take this," she stammered, backing up half a step. "And I can't just walk off my shift. What's going on?" His eyes darkened, the calm cracking. "Nadia, please. I'm a dead man sitting in a diner booth. My own second-in-command sold out my compound to another family an hour ago. I led them here so my mother and sister would have time to get to the airport and get in the air. This is where it ends for me. It doesn't have to end for you. Go." Before she could fully absorb what he'd just told her, headlights flooded the diner's interior, washing the walls in a hard, sudden white. Through the iced-over windows, 6 black Suburbans jumped the curb one after another in quick, practiced succession, tires grinding over frozen asphalt, boxing the building in on every side. Front door, side windows, street access, all of it sealed off within seconds. The beams cut through the dark like searchlights sweeping a prison yard, lighting up dust drifting lazily in the diner's stale air, oblivious to what was coming. Nadia gasped and dropped the carafe. It shattered against the checkered floor, sending hot coffee splashing everywhere, the sound of breaking glass swallowed almost instantly by something far more frightening. Salvatore didn't move. He didn't reach for a gun. He simply lifted his mug, took one unhurried sip, and let out a breath. "Too late," he murmured. "Get behind the counter, Nadia. Head down, eyes closed." Car doors slammed in unison outside, the sound sharp and final in the frozen night. Shapes moved against the glass, a lot of them, more than she could count in the split second she allowed herself to look. The street noise died completely, replaced by the cold mechanical click of weapons being readied, a sound she'd never heard before but somehow recognized instantly in her bones. Nadia backed away on shaking legs, ducking behind the service counter near the old mechanical register, her mind scrambling helplessly to reconcile nursing textbooks and clinical rotations with the violence unfolding 3 feet away from where she crouched. The bell over the door gave one last cheerful, absurd little jingle before the heavy door was kicked clean off its hinges, splintering against the wall in an explosion of wood and cold air. Marco Castellano stepped through the wreckage of the doorframe, wrapped in a camel coat, chewing lazily on a cigar as if he had all the time in the world, because, as far as he was concerned, he did. Behind him poured a wall of armed men, spreading out with brutal, rehearsed precision to cover every window, every exit, every blind spot in the place, boots crunching over glass and splintered wood. Crouched behind the counter with both hands clamped over her mouth to keep from making a sound, Nadia counted in a rising panic. 10, 20, 28 men jammed into a room built to seat maybe 40 customers on a good night, every one of them carrying suppressed weapons, shotguns, heavy pistols slung low and ready. The sheer number of bodies crammed into that small space made the air feel instantly suffocatingly unbreathable. Marco walked slowly down the center aisle, unhurried, almost bored, his shoes crunching over the broken pieces of the coffee pot, and stopped 12 feet from booth 6. "Salvatore," Marco said, mock pity dripping off every word. "Look at you, the untouchable Moreno patriarch, sitting alone in a grease pit, drinking swamp water. How the mighty fall." Salvatore didn't move, didn't glance at the wall of muzzles trained on his chest. He just looked at Marco. "Marco, took 28 men before you felt safe enough to stand in the same room as me. I'm touched." Marco's smile flickered. "Your arrogance dies with you tonight. Your compound's mine now, Sal. Your dock operations are being seized as we speak. Tino handed over the encryption keys an hour ago." Something in Salvatore's grip on his mug tightened, the only crack in his composure at the mention of his lieutenant's betrayal. "Tino always was a coward," he said flatly. "He'll turn on you too. It's who he is." "Maybe," Marco said, taking a long drag and exhaling toward the ceiling. "But I won't be stupid enough to turn my back on him the way you did." "New era, Sal. The old ways are done. The Moreno name dies right here, on a diner floor." From behind the counter, Nadia was frozen, every trauma drill instinct in her screaming to assess, to act, except there was no protocol in any textbook for watching an execution. Then one of Marco's men, a bulky enforcer with a scarred neck, caught sight of the edge of her pink uniform skirt poking out from behind the register. "Boss," he grunted, aiming his weapon that direction. "We've got a civilian." Marco didn't even turn his head. "No witnesses. Kill the waitress first. I want Sal to watch someone innocent die because he failed." Salvatore lunged upward, palms slamming the table. "She has nothing to do with this. Let her go, Marco. You have me. Shoot the girl," Marco said coldly. The enforcer stepped toward the counter, weapon raised, finger tightening. In that sliver of a second, Nadia understood, with total clarity, that she was about to die. No graduation, no years of saving lives, just bleeding out next to a deep fryer, unless she did something reckless enough to change the outcome. Her eyes darted around the cramped space and landed on a heavy red industrial lever bolted to the wall under the register. Delgado's was an old building, a relic from another era that had been cheaply renovated a dozen times over, but a previous owner, terrified of grease fires, had once installed an overbuilt, military-grade chemical fire suppression system. Her manager had warned her on day one, "Never touch that lever. It's wired into the main breaker. Pull it, and the power dies, while the ceiling dumps enough foam to bury an elephant." Nadia also knew something else. Behind the walk-in freezer, hidden behind a false wall of shelving, sat an old rusted hatch leading straight into the city's storm drain tunnels, left over from Prohibition-era smuggling. The math was simple and brutal. 28 armed men against one exhausted crime boss, and one waitress about to change the equation entirely. As the enforcer leaned over the counter to fire, Nadia threw her body backward, grabbed the cold steel lever with both hands, and hauled it down with everything she had. A crack, then a boom. The main breaker died, plunging the diner into total blackness. Before anyone could react to the darkness, charges in the ceiling vents blew with a deafening mechanical shriek, and thousands of gallons of thick fire-retardant foam blasted downward. Chaos erupted instantly. Men screamed as foam coated their eyes and throats, and jammed the mechanisms of their weapons. Blind and panicking, someone's finger slipped. A single gunshot shattered a window, and that set off a chain reaction of blind, panicked gunfire, muzzle flashes strobing through the churning white cloud, like lightning trapped in a storm. Bullets tore through vinyl booths, shattered the pie case, chewed into the ceiling. Nadia didn't wait. She crawled low around the edge of the counter, through rising foam, found Salvatore exactly where he'd been standing, grabbed the lapel of his ruined jacket, and hauled. "Follow me!" she screamed over the gunfire and hissing foam. Stunned, but sharp enough to know a lifeline when he saw one, Salvatore dropped low and let her drag him toward the swinging kitchen doors. The suppression system was firing back there too, turning the prep line into a whiteout. Nadia navigated on pure muscle memory, dodging fryers and prep tables, hit the heavy freezer handle, shoved Salvatore inside, and slammed her weight against the door behind them. The insulation swallowed the gunfire instantly. Inside, the air was sub-zero. Nadia scrambled over frozen cases and bags of ice, hands bleeding as she tore down the false shelving. "Help me!" she yelled, breath fogging in front of her face. Salvatore snapped out of it, spotted the rusted wheel of the hidden hatch, and threw his weight against it, muscles straining against decades of rust, until it finally gave with a horrible metal screech. He hauled the iron door up, revealing a black shaft that smelled of wet earth and sewage. Behind them, the freezer door was already shuddering under heavy caliber rounds chewing through its hinges. "Ladies first," Salvatore said, holding the hatch open. Nadia swung her legs over and dropped into the dark. He followed seconds later, dragging the lid shut just as the freezer door blew off its hinges completely, sealing them into total blackness underground. The fall into the old smuggling tunnel knocked the wind out of her. She hit uneven, damp cobblestone hard, knees scraping raw. Above, the hatch slammed shut, and a muffled, rhythmic pounding started immediately. Marco's men trying to force the lock. Salvatore landed beside her with a sharp breath. A Zippo clicked and flared, throwing orange light over the close brick walls. "Keep moving," he said, voice tight. "That hatch won't hold forever. This tunnel runs under the old rail line and comes out near the shipping canal." Nadia scrambled up, her uniform soaked through with freezing, chemical-tainted water, heart slamming against her ribs. In the flickering light, she noticed dark wetness spreading down his left sleeve. "You're hit," she said, professional instinct cutting through her fear. "Ricochet," he said, already turning to walk. "Missed the artery. I'll manage." "If you bleed out down here, I'm stuck without a map," she shot back, grabbing his good arm and forcing him to stop. "Sit now." He blinked, caught off guard by the authority in her voice. A man who commanded armies with a whisper, being ordered around by a 25-year-old nursing student in a freezing sewer. To his own surprise, he sat on a rusted outflow pipe. She knelt, took the lighter, set it on a dry brick for light, and without hesitation pulled his torn collar down to expose the wound. A jagged piece of shrapnel had torn through his bicep. "Hold still," she said, ripping strips from her apron. "You're remarkably calm for someone who just declared war on the Castellano family," he said, wincing as her cold fingers worked. "I work nights in a diner where people pull knives over cold hash browns," she muttered, tying off a tight, efficient knot. "I'm also deep in debt and failing pharmacology. A hit squad is just the cherry on a genuinely awful week." A low, surprised laugh escaped him. Nadia Isabel Cruz. "I badly underestimated you." She looked up, her face inches from his in the dim light, adrenaline having stripped away the usual invisible line between customer and waitress. She saw exhaustion in his eyes, but also something fierce and unbroken. He saw a woman tougher than half the men on his payroll. "Why'd you do it?" he asked quietly. "I handed you an envelope with enough money to vanish. You could have walked out the back. Instead, you cut the power and dragged me into a freezer. You risked everything." She finished the knot, wiped her hands on her skirt. "Because you looked at me," he frowned. "What?" "When they came in," she said, picking the lighter back up, "Marco told them to kill me. You tried to stop him. In all the time I've worked there, you're the only person who ever looked at me like a human being instead of a coffee machine. I wasn't going to let them shoot you in my diner." A quiet settled between them, broken only by water dripping somewhere in the dark. In that moment, without either of them quite realizing it, the foundation of a ruthless empire shifted. Salvatore reached out with his good hand and brushed a wet strand of hair from her cheek, his touch warm against the freezing air. "I swear to you, Nadia," he said, voice dropping to a rough whisper, "if we make it out of these tunnels, you will never have to worry about anything again." Before she could take in the weight of that promise, a heavy metallic clang echoed from somewhere behind them. The hatch had given way. Flashlight beams swept the distant dark, boots splashing through flooded passage. "They're in," Salvatore said, his calm snapping instantly back into cold focus. He killed the flame and grabbed her hand. "Run." They tore through the blackness, guided only by touch and his memory of the old tunnels. The air growing thicker with every step, thick with rust and stagnant river water and something colder that neither of them wanted to name. Behind them, the shouts of Marco's men rose steadily, echoing off brick and pipe, flashlight beams occasionally catching the curve of the ceiling overhead like searchlights hunting for a way in. "Left, here," Salvatore hissed, pulling her into a narrow side passage. It opened into an enormous underground chamber, an abandoned pump station left over from the city's old water system, giant rusted turbines looming like sleeping metal giants. Weak moonlight filtered through iron grates 30 feet overhead, throwing long shadows across the concrete. Salvatore didn't hesitate, moving straight to the largest pump housing, dropping to his knees and running his hands along its base. "What are you looking for?" Nadia gasped, clutching her side. "Marco thinks I'm the kind of fool who walks blind into a trap," he said, fingers finding a loose plate. He pried it back, revealing a waterproof case hidden in the recess. "He thinks Tino's betrayal left me with nothing. I knew Tino was a rat 3 weeks ago." Inside the case sat a suppressed pistol, an encrypted satellite phone, and a full medical kit. "The diner wasn't random," he continued, checking the pistol's magazine. "It was my extraction point. I just didn't expect Marco to send 28 men. I planned for 10. Your move with the suppression system bought me exactly the time I needed." He powered on the phone, waited for a signal through the grate above, and hit a single speed dial button. "It's done," he said into the receiver. "We're at the rendezvous." Green light. He tossed the phone aside and handed her the medical kit. "Get behind that turbine, head down, about to get loud." She obeyed, scrambling behind the curved iron hull, knees to her chest, heart in her throat. Moments later, Marco Castellano and 8 of his men spilled into the chamber, flashlight beams sweeping wildly until they locked onto Salvatore, standing perfectly still in the center of the room, his injured arm loose at his side. Marco stepped forward, breathing hard, his coat ruined with mud and chemical foam, and leveled his weapon at Salvatore's chest. "End of the road, Sal," he spat, wiping grease from his cheek. "No more tricks, no more waitresses with fire alarms, just you, me, and a shallow grave under the river." Salvatore smiled, a cold, feral expression that sent a chill down Nadia's spine, even from behind the shelter of the turbine. "You always were short-sighted, Marco. You thought you bought my inner circle. You only bought the trash I was already done with anyway." "Shoot him!" Marco screamed, his voice cracking with something close to panic. Before a single trigger could be pulled, the iron grates 30 feet above them exploded inward with a deafening roar. Smoke grenades dropped into the chamber, blooming into thick gray clouds, and ropes came down from street level as a dozen armored operatives rappelled into the room, laser sights cutting red lines through the smoke. These were Salvatore's own people, an elite unit loyal to him alone. The ambush was fast and total. Suppressed weapons coughed through the haze, and Marco's men, blind and caught flat-footed, went down before they even understood they'd been surrounded. When the smoke cleared, Marco was the only one left on his feet, all his bravado gone, 3 laser dots painted on his chest. He dropped his weapon. Salvatore walked toward him slowly, pistol loose in hand. "A new era," he murmured, pressing the barrel to Marco's forehead. "Let this be the first lesson of it. The Moreno family doesn't forget, and we don't forgive." He pulled the trigger. The shot cracked through the chamber, and Marco crumpled onto the wet concrete, his ambitions dying with him. Silence fell except for dripping water as the tactical team secured the room with quiet efficiency. Their commander stepped forward and draped a fresh coat over Salvatore's torn shoulder. "Compound secure, boss," he reported. "Tino's been handled. Your mother and sister landed safe." "Good," Salvatore said, pulling the coat on. He turned from the wreckage and crossed to the turbine, holstering his weapon and offering Nadia his hand. She looked up at him, pale, uniform ruined, eyes burning with something unshakable. "It's over," he said gently. "You're safe." She reached up and took his hand, and he pulled her to her feet without effort. "My debt?" she asked, a faint, breathless smile breaking through the chaos still settling around them. "Gone," he promised, thumb brushing over her knuckles. "But I have a new offer for you, Nadia Isabel Cruz, a woman who can outsmart a crime family with a fire alarm and patch a bullet wound in a sewer, shouldn't be pouring coffee for a living." "What are you offering?" she asked, pulse picking up for an entirely different reason now. "Everything," he said, eyes full of fierce, possessive devotion. "My world is dangerous, but if you stand beside me, I promise you, you'll rule it." She looked around at the fallen enemies, the loyal soldiers, and finally at the scarred, magnetic man holding her hand. The diner was gone, her old life was gone, and tightening her grip on his hand, she found she didn't miss it one bit. "I hope you like your coffee black, Sal," she whispered, "because I'm done serving it." Did this pulse-pounding story of underworld loyalty and one ordinary woman's extraordinary nerve keep you glued to your seat? The shadows of Detroit are hiding plenty more secrets, and we're only getting started. If you loved this intense mafia romance drama, hit that like button, share it with your fellow thrill seekers, and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment telling us what you think Nadia's first move as the new queen of the underworld should be.